Okay. I'm gonna let anyone else in who joins, but now that it's 11:03, I think we'll begin. So it's great to see that you guys have selected where you're headed to school. So it looks like we have some Deakin, Griffith, Macrae, University of Queensland, Monash, and the University of Melbourne. Okay, wonderful. So a little bit of variety there. So for those of you who don't know me already, I know I introduced myself in some of the AusTrek Facebook groups, but I'm entering my second year at the University of Queensland. And I'm also a co-founder of CAAMSA, and I think that's why many of you are here today to learn about who we are and how we can really support you through your medical journeys in Australia. Because of course, it's a really big and significant step. It's an exciting one, of course, but there's a lot to navigate. And as an IMG, of course, it's important to be aware of all the information and whatnot and what resources are available to you. So here's just a quick overview. Before we really begin the presentation, I just want to also say at any point in time, please put your questions in the chat. If I don't answer them immediately, we'll circle back to them at the end. As well, at the end, we are going to have a portion just for questions. If you guys have any, again, for those of you who just joined, I won't be able to necessarily respond to specifics in terms of program requirements, different courses respective to, your specific schools, of course, but I will be able to provide some insight, more generally speaking, when it comes to how to kind of approach your MD as an international. If you're interested in, different pathways, whether it be Canada or the US or staying in Australia, I'll be able to offer some of that, but it will be more difficult for me to specifically talk about the different courses at different schools. So anyways, with that being said, you guys have a chance to just look at this overview here. Really, CAAMSA was started about this time last year, and the other co-founder, Angela Kwan, she's actually a Canadian medical graduate. So we started it really with the goal of supporting medical students, specifically international students. Personally speaking, I'm very aware that going to Australia to study medicine is exciting and it's a big step. But of course, in terms of making sure that you're aware of the processes, if you do wish to return home to match, for instance, whether it be the exams you have to write, whether it be USMLE, whether it be the MCQ or the NAC, OSCEs, all that kind of stuff. It's very important to ensure that you're aware of all that and you're supported through that. And so Angela Kwan, who's the other co-founder, and I, we of course really valued AusTrek in helping us get to Australia, but we saw that there was a gap in really supporting students in Australia studying medicine and for their careers beyond that, really in terms of residency after your MD and whatnot. And so with that, we've really branched out and been able to start a lot of kind of different initiatives and events within our organization, as you can see on the screen. So we host specialty series. So our goal really for the specialty series is to highlight, as kind of the name implies, certain subspecialties within medicine, whether it be psychiatry, whether it be neurology, cardiology, respirology, all of that. Essentially there, we invite clinicians and physicians from Australia, Canada, and the United States. And really, we do that to ensure that we have kind of a global perspective, and we're really networking and establishing those relationships on an international scale. Because, of course, as we know, if you are interested in practicing in any of those respective countries, it is, of course, important to make sure that you are able to start making some connections in each of those countries. For the Matching Matters series, that, of course, is more directed at matching, and whether that be in the CAAMSA for Canada or the NRMP, which is the service used for the United States. Our series for the Matching Matters really highlights the pathway, the requirements, the timelines, and we do that through actually inviting past residents. So for instance, we hosted one for the US and Canada last year, where we had a US resident and we had a Canadian resident personally talk about their experiences as an IMG and how they navigated that in terms of matching back to their home country. So that's a series we offer. On our website, we also have a resource section, which can help you with exams, for instance. So the board exams that I mentioned that are required to write in each of those countries. And then finally, we have a research and kind of an alumni faculty lounge. So any essentially faculty, physician, clinician that ever speaks at any of our events, or we do work with in terms of collaborating on research or anything like that, we have on our website. And any one of our members or anyone who's interested in terms of, sorry, I'm just going to admit a few people here. Anyone who's interested essentially in contacting, for instance, any of those past speakers are able to do so. So we have a form at each of the bottom of our web pages where, let's say, you watched a neurology series and you were really intrigued by the Canadian speaker who's from, let's say, UFT, who spoke about something, and maybe they have an opportunity to do some research with them or whatnot. After the event, we'll have a form on our website where you can put your email in, you can put your inquiry in, and you can, of course, request to get into contact with that person. So that's kind of an overview summary of what we do at CAAMSA. And here's a little bit more details. All of this is on our website. So if you go to caamsa.com, you'll be able to navigate through these different web pages. As I mentioned, here's our specialty series. All of it's recorded as well. We upload them all into YouTube. So if you aren't able to attend a specialty series, then of course you're able to do so at a later time when it's convenient for you. And again, here's our Matching Matters page. And then finally, we just launched this Highlights in Medicine series. And here our goal, similarly, as the name implies, we're trying to keep up to date with where different topics in medicine are, specifically psychedelic therapy and treating mood disorders is kind of a hot topic right now. And fortunately, we had a connection with a psychologist in Canada, Dr. Roger McIntyre, who's really an expert in this field. And so our goal here was to just inspire and educate and have an open discussion about certain topics in medicine, which has been a really successful series for us as well. I want to power through these slides because I really want to get to the questions at the end. I think that's going to be the most valuable for all of your time. And I know that the World Cup games are on and whatnot. Maybe you have them on there in the background, but quickly, for those of you who don't know, of course, if you're attending an Australian medical school and you're not an Australian citizen, you will be classified as an IMG, which is an international medical graduate. As it says on the screen there, your primary qualifications are obtained in a country other than the country you're applying. So really how that is relevant to us is when it comes to applying to CAAMSA or the NRMP, which is the residency services, there's kind of a specific subsection of specialties and positions available for IMGs specifically. As you can see on the screen here, for the NRMP, non-US citizen IMGs, here are the top specialties from the 2022 match intake. So as you can see, a lot of positions available for internal medicine, family medicine, pediatrics, pathology, and neurology. Quickly, I just wanted to highlight that there is a difference between North America and Australia when it comes to your medical training. So similarly, in both countries, you're going to complete a 4-year MD. I know that some of the Australian ones are, I think, a 6-year straight out of high school, like James Cook does that. But I think for the most of us, it's a 4-year program. Now, the difference lies in the years, the first years preceding your MD. So in Australia, you actually have to complete a 1 or 2 year internship. And as you can see on the left side of the screen there, you're actually something called a junior medical officer. There's a lot of terms. Don't worry too much about this. This slide is just to highlight that in Australia specifically, there's actually going to be a couple of years extra in terms of how many years you'll need to finally become an attending or consultant. And so a lot of people, there's advantages and disadvantages to both pathways, in my opinion. A lot of people argue that in the Australian system, because you get a couple of years being an intern and junior house officer, you're a little bit more well balanced because you have more of that general medicine experience rather than completing an MD and going straight into a residency program specific to a specialty in medicine. But of course, the downside to that is that you're going to have a couple more years until you're that specialized attending or consultant in whatever field that you choose. All of these slides will be shared though. As you can see here, though, the timeline is a little bit different. And then here's just an example in terms of the US pathway specifically. So I did mention that there are some board exams to take in both Canada and the US if you're interested in residency. For the US, USMLE Step 1 and 2 are the big exams to note. USMLE Step 1 is typically written at the end of your year 2. Your MD is really divided into 2 phases. Phase 1 is year 1 and 2, and phase 2 is 3 and 4. And phase 1 is primarily, basic sciences, clinical sciences, a little bit more in the classroom. You will have some hospital experience, but your USMLE Step 1, all the foundations and all the systems and units that you learn will be tested. It's a heavy exam, similar to the MCAT, but relevant for med students in what they learned in year 1 and 2. And then USMLE Step 2 is written typically at the end of year 4 when you've kind of decided or applied to residencies already. And that one is a lot more clinical based than USMLE Step 1, which is more kind of science heavy. This is on our website, just a little spotlight of the different countries and the where to apply and eligibility and requirements and whatnot. I don't want to spend too much time on all of this. These are all going to be available to all of you. But again, CAAMS Canadian Match Service, I shared some highlights here in terms of the statistics for the 2022 R1 intake. As I mentioned before, usually applicants are classified based on whether they're Canadian medical graduate, CMG, US medical graduate, or IMG. As you can see, go through it yourself. You can see the percentage match rates. And then actually, if you look based on region, so we're, as an Australian medical graduate, we're going to be classified under Oceania and Pacific Islands. And you can see in 2022, there's a 71% match rate which is the highest out of any region as an IMG. So 31 people last year from Australian Medical School matched into CAAMS. And then here's the NRMP, which is for the US. Similarly, it's listed a little bit differently here. They break it down by specialty, and then you can see on the right columns here, whether you're a US citizen IMG or a non-US IMG. Most of us probably fall within the non-US IMG unless you're a US citizen already. But you can take a look for yourself here. As I mentioned on one of the first slides, lots of positions, of course, available in internal medicine and family medicine, a little bit of the eligibility and general information. Again, I wouldn't worry about any of this. I also I should have maybe prefaced with this as well. A lot of what I'm discussing, specifically when it comes to the match and residency, is just to provide you guys with a general overlook and overview and things to keep in mind. It's way too early to even know if, of course, you're interested in staying in Australia or Canada or the US. Many things change, and there's positives to all the pathways and to keep those options open for you. So I wouldn't worry about any of the specifics. This is just a big picture overview for all you guys, how we can support you at CAAMSA and what events we run and so forth. Here's again some exam resources. I won't dwell too much. This is on our website. And then I think this is a valuable slide for all of you guys. So I just want to make sure everyone can still hear me, right? Because, yep, okay, awesome. And I will get back to these questions. I see some in the chat here. So this slide here, all of your respective universities will have a little bit of a different curriculum and course that they offer. Oftentimes what you'll notice, especially in the first couple months, is that there's so many different resources, and all of them are laid out on the screen here, or most of the popular ones at least. And everyone kind of chooses what works for them or what resource they like. Many of these things you won't be familiar with, of course, which is totally fine. But basically the point I want to make is, as a medical student, there's obviously going to be tons and tons of information thrown at you, and that's normal. That's completely that's part of the process and part of the journey, and understanding how to study is something that you'll develop through your first semester and whatnot. These are just some resources that really helped me and a lot of my peers. As you can see on the screen, if you're more of a visual learner and like animations and more conceptual based learning, I think Osmosis is really great. It's a service. They have free videos online, so you can try out a lot of these things before you purchase a subscription. Amboss, the Bible of med school. I mean, Amboss, you could search up any term, any condition, and it's going to be beautifully laid out with like summary, etiology, pathophysiology, diagnostics, treatment, complications, differential diagnoses. It just all laid out for you. That's a great one. Sketchy. Sketchy is pharmacology and microbiology. They kind of use these mnemonics is what they call them. They kind of create these comic-based images and comic-based scenes, and you'll notice that there's so many different terms and complications, contraindications, uses for all these different pharmacological drugs. And so Sketchy is a nice way to kind of be able to associate an image or like a scene with that. It might sound funny to you, but if you guys like watching like comics and stuff like that, Sketchy is amazing. Past Medicine was one of my personal favorites. It's free, and essentially each system has a question bank. And for your exams, it was just great practice to do. Do we get all these? I'll answer all these questions after I'm done here. I see some in the chat. But Past Medicine is great. There's tons of YouTubers. I put a few of my favorites on the board there, and then Boards and Beyond. Really, the Boards and Beyond is great for the USMLE and in particular. I feel like Boards and Beyond is very the layout and how they have every system in every discipline, and they have a lecture on everything. So let's say you have a lecture on head trauma, let's just say. Boards and Beyond would have a lecture on exactly what you're doing. So if you need an extra kind of resource, or if you want a lecture kind of delivered in a different way than maybe your school offered, Boards and Beyond is just a great standardized website and service that will have essentially every lecture on every topic that you'll come across in med school. And it's really great for USMLE and following along for step 1 specifically. And then I have Pathoma at the bottom here. You'll realize that pathology is kind of the most important, in my opinion, one of the most important things to kind of make sure to learn, because it ties into everything, whether it be histology or pharmacology or pathophysiology. And Pathoma is, you can get a hard copy or the online copy, and it's, again, the most, in my opinion, high yield concepts to get your head around as a MD 1 and 2. I'm just going to admit some more people here. I think there's a couple more. Okay. I got a question. I might just answer this question here. Did you get all of these resources? So I personally have Amboss and Online Med Ed. Osmosis, there's some free resources for. Past Medicine is free. YouTube is of course free. You will, unless you have YouTube Premium, you're gonna have to watch ads, unfortunately. And then Boards and Beyond I have as well. In terms of what I'd say, like, again, it's hard to say which is the best. I think everyone's learning style is different. I think what you're gonna have to do is, in your first semester, see what resources your schools provide you with. Because of course, each curriculum will have many resources in itself built into the curriculum. And then you can play around with the free versions of a lot of these services, and whatever you find is most useful for your learning, I'd go with that. I think having all of them would be overload and probably not feasible in terms of cost, but I'd say picking 1 or 2 of these. Of course, Past Medicine and YouTube are free, but picking 1 or 2 of these would be beneficial. Now, before we get to the Q&A, I just wanted to put a little slide in on how to stay connected with us. So our Instagram is here, our Facebook is here, our Twitter is here, and our LinkedIn is here. Again, these slides will be shared. Follow us across platforms if you want updates on our events. We also post like match interview tips, resources. We stay up to date with the CAAMSA and NRMP deadlines and post all of those. I did kind of try to promote this on the OzCheck pages, but I have a list of everyone here today. And if you did attend, and then go to our Instagram, which is at CAAMSA_. If you follow our account, like our account, and tag some friends, you'll be entered to give into this giveaway. And as I mentioned, Amboss here, one of my personal favorites, great resource. We're giving away a 6-month subscription to one of you guys. So after this, go ahead and, it's obviously a free giveaway. So if you're interested, you can participate with that. And then finally, before we get to the Q&A, if you ever have any questions, this is all on our website as well in terms of contacting us with our email. But if you ever have questions, feel free to email us at that address there. We'll also be posting application opportunities for our executive team, for our research team, and even as a research assistant. I know I didn't talk too much about research, but we've started an international research collaboration at CAAMSA. It's a whole chapter of our website. So if you go to caamsa.com, you'll be able to look into our ongoing projects and our completed projects as well. We also have a form at the bottom of that page if you are interested in helping us complete and conduct the research. Again, I do want to preface and say that it's going to be a very overwhelming next couple of months between the move, between getting settled and starting, of course, your academic journey and your first year of med school. It's a tall task, of course, but you guys are all here for a reason, and you should be excited as well because you're really starting. Many of you probably come from an undergrad or master's or whatnot. And so it's just continuing down that journey of learning. And so, yeah, I think I just want to say you guys should be excited. But in terms of CAAMSA, in terms of research, in terms of getting involved, prioritize yourself and prioritize getting settled in. I'd say make those a priority. In terms of extracurriculars, in terms of some of this research stuff, if you're interested and you're able to handle it in your first year, then, as I said, reach out and look out for application postings. But I also don't want to overwhelm anyone because just in itself, starting your first year of med school is of course a tall task. Okay. Awesome. So this is now an opportunity for us to do a little bit of a Q&A. Okay. I do have some questions in the chat that I might just start off with. Is it possible to apply residency in other countries while doing internship in Australia? So yes. So as you guys know, or as you may know, I should say, the Australia intake in terms of your MD starts in January or end of February, or sorry, end of January, beginning of February, depending on your school. So if you're from Canada, for instance, or the US, you'll know that our undergrad, our first semesters usually started in September to December, right, into the holidays, and then January to around, that May time. For Australia, the seasons are completely flipped and their semesters are laid out a little bit differently in terms of a timeline. So January to June and then July to November instead of September to December and January to May. So with that being said, in terms of applying to CAAMSA, which is in Canada, or NRMP, which is in the US, the timeline will be a little bit off. So you'll actually be starting your internship in Australia after your MD, because you'll be graduating in November as you're applying to CAAMSA and NRMP. So you'll actually be working as an intern, or that's what most people decide if they do, of course, choose the option to return to Canada or the US. They will, as I mentioned, be starting that internship, and then they're going to be applying as they're in their internship to the residency. And if they get in, then they'll, of course, just leave their internship and return to that. I hope that answers that question. Is the internship only if you're looking for residency in Aus? Yes. So the internship is the pathway that every Australian medical graduate has to undertake if they want to complete their medical training in Australia. If you want to write the USMLE, should you still write it at the end of your second year in Australia, or should the timeline be different? The USMLE should be written Yes, so as we just mentioned, the timelines are a little bit different from North America and America. In terms of your USMLE, yes. So you're going to finish your second year in November, December, and you'd be probably looking to write your USMLE Step 1 in November, December. Again, one thing I also wanted to just say is that, and I mentioned this in the beginning, you'll have even myself, I'm a second year med student. I'm interested in going to the US and Canada and keeping that option open, but I'm still open to potentially the Australian pathway as well, and things change. And of course, there's no guarantees when it comes to applications of it. Not, I was able to, provide some statistics and just some information, but I just wanted to also preface and say, of course, keep your options open, to not stress too much about this in the early stages. You're just embarking on you're just about to embark on an incredible journey. Embrace that. Keep options open if you're interested, but really don't limit yourself. And if Australia is amazing to you, and it is a beautiful country, and you guys will see that, and that's a very possible option for you guys as well. So I don't want to say anything and go too far along certain paths, but just wanted to provide an overview for all you guys. Okay, let's continue with some questions here. So someone told me that CAAMSA might be able to help connect me to Toronto Notes in the Makoski book. Do you have PDF copies? Yeah, so just in terms of resources, we do have some resources in-house that we can share if you email us. Specifically, if you just in the email mention what resource you're looking for, we can try connecting you to that. How many years does it take to become an attending family doctor? So an attending family doctor, so it's not necessarily black and white. So in Australia, each state or region has a little bit of a different requirement. So some states, I believe most states have moved to 2 years of internship. So you'll do your 4-year MD, you'll do a 2-year internship. And I have referenced that slide earlier in the presentation, but you do need to become a junior medical officer, which takes another couple of years. So I believe it's an extra 3 years to become an attending family physician. However, when it comes to certain subspecialties, that's when it may take a little bit longer in Australia to complete the training because of the pathway. But for family medicine specifically, don't fact check me or make sure to fact check me, sorry, but don't quote me on this. I believe when it comes to like family medicine, that one will not have a big difference between Canada and Australia in terms of years of training, because it's not like a specialized program that you have to apply for afterwards. So I believe after your 2 years of internship, it would probably just be a year or two of fellowship, and then you'd be the attending after that. So 4 years, about. All of the ones. Okay. Does CAAMSA help us find secure? Okay. So yes, something we tried doing, of course, is helping connect our students with observership opportunities, research opportunities in the countries that they're interested in. As mentioned, there's no necessarily guarantees, but let's say we have a connection to an opening with an observership. If, of course, there's many students who want to apply to that, it's going to come down to an application or merit-based. If there's many people applying for one spot or a couple spots, for instance. But if we're able to connect you to something specialized or specific, then we'll of course try to do that for you. But there's no necessarily guarantees that we can do that for you, but we try to support as many students as we can. Does UQ also help Canadians with step 1 prep or Austrian students? What does UQ do to help students prep? Yeah, so in terms of, I can't speak to all the schools. I can speak a little bit on UQ standpoint, but of course, the Australian MD program is curated for the Australian medical program and for the Australian medical training pathway, of course. So if you're interested in applying to the US or Canada afterwards, a lot of those steps and responsibilities that come with that in terms of applications, eligibility requirements, all of that kind of stuff, that's going to have to be done by yourself. A lot of schools will have international student subcommittees. that will help support you in that. But most, in terms of what I know, most schools, expect you to, they'll provide you with some resources, but it's on yourself to really apply and take initiative when it comes to applying back to any of those respective countries. Do students apply to internships at other universities, hospitals, or do students stay at their med school? Is that a question for Australia specifically? If you could just clarify that for me. In Australia, okay. Do students apply to internships? Okay, yeah. So I don't know too much about this, but basically, when you graduate from after 4 years of MD in Australia, you apply to internship, and you are guaranteed an internship, or almost guaranteed an internship, in your own state that you completed your MD in. However, if you wish to apply out of state, you can, but priority is given within each state respectively. So let's say you're in New South Wales. If you're an intern, or if you're an MD graduate in New South Wales, then you are obviously preferenced in terms of applying to internships in New South Wales. However, if you're interested in Victoria or Queensland, for instance, you can still apply, but you just won't be preferenced as high. Doesn't mean you won't get a position. It just means that in terms of how they preference, it's within the state that you graduate in, if that makes sense and answers your question. Any other questions? If I'll just keep using the chat, if that may be easier. If anyone else has any questions.
Can I ask questions in mic?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for the workshop. That was really helpful to get an idea of like how the med schools in Australia works with the residency programs. I have some questions about the stat, like where to find the stats about like getting into this specialty in Australia, because they do like 2 years of internship and then you need certain position to apply for specialties, it seems like.
Yeah.
But after like finishing those period and then you apply for specialties, do they provide like information on like how many positions there are for like each specialty, and then like how many students or like internship or the junior doctors apply for those positions?
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll send, or I might be able to find this now, but as I mentioned, in Canada and the US, I talked about CAAMSA and IRMP. In Australia, it's something called OPERA. I can, if you just give me 1 minute here, what I'll do is I'll add a slide to this presentation. I'm going to share the slides with you all, and I'll add the website link and where to direct you to some of those stats.
Okay, that sounds good. I don't think I have because like how I came into this meeting is that I saw your post on Tract Facebook group, so I will just email the info.
Yes.
This Google email, and then
yeah, that works. If you have any specific questions or inquiries, just email us there and we'll get back to you with a response.
Yes, good. And I have one more question about one of the slide. It's a match rate for US. Match rate matches by specialty. So it seems like the table, the list of specialties in the table are not like all the specialties. And it seems like some specialties don't even have a position for non-US citizens, immigrants. So does that mean it's highly likely to not possible to get into those specialties if we are like graduated from Australia? Yes.
Good question. So I came back to the slide here. So this is just a snapshot. So I'll provide links for you guys after this, but this table goes on a lot longer. So I just snapshotted about, what are these, 12 of these specialties or 15 here, but all the specialties are listed in table 2 on this report, where you'll see an outline of all of the specialties. To your second point, it is correct in saying that there are some positions that have less seats available or have even no seats available, like certain subspecialties. So yes, it is very important to make sure you do your due diligence. Some of the really hyper competitive specialties like plastic surgery, dermatology, it's not impossible. It is definitely still possible, but there's going to be limited seats for those subspecialties. So that's why I tried to highlight that. Of course, there are many internal medicine, family medicine, and general surgery and whatnot. The thing I will say is general surgery residency allows you to then go into subspecialty, whether it be plastics or orthopedics, or trauma surgery or whatnot. So there is plastic surgery and orthopedic surgery and all in emergency and all that kind of stuff, but there is also an alternative path of going through the general surgery route as well. So I will say that. But yes, I'll provide links for you. It is correct to say that there are, you should keep in mind that there are some specialties that have less availability or no availability for IMGs or non-US IMGs in the US specifically. All of the reports and data are available on the CAAMSA and NRP website if you wanted to take a deeper look into it, though.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. I want to see where we got to here. If you want a really competitive specialty with few seats, is it more wise to finish it in Australia and then go to the US or Canada? Also a good question. So from what I've been told, there's really 2 times that would make the most sense if you wanted to return to Canada or the US. And that would be either immediately after your MD, which means you're going to be really starting your residency and training in the country that you want to practice in, whether it be Canada or the US. So as I mentioned, going through, if it's CAAMSA for the residency or NRMP for the US, making sure that, of course, you've written step 1, step 2, the MCQE, NAC, OSCEs, all that's for the CAAMSA as well. It would be, as I mentioned, after your MD, fourth year of MD, returning back. Now, if that's not possible, or you want to stay in Australia for a little longer, or you want to train there, or you're not decided yet, then the next time would be the next easiest time, I should say, would be after you've completed all of your training. So you're an attending in Australia, or you're a consultant is what they call it. And I believe a lot of countries, so you'd have to check specifically, but Canada and the US, for instance, you would have to look into. It gets very complicated with what specialty you're in, what college then you would be applying to. But essentially, if you're a consultant in Australia, and I believe you have, I think it's 12 months, almost like a year of work experience as a consultant, then you can apply. I think it's be called for like a fellowship or something in back where you want to end up. So in Canada or the US. But again, that's after you've completed all your training, after you're a consultant, and after you've had some experience as a consultant. But yes, I'd say if there's 2 times that you're interested in potentially, moving to a certain country, it'd be immediately after your MD or after you've completed all your training. When you're in the middle of your training, it becomes a little bit harder to navigate all the requirements and all of that kind of stuff. So I hope that answers that. But yes, I mean, you may have a higher chance, let's say, of completing a very competitive specialty in Australia, as of course, graduating from Australian medical school, you're on the same, how we've grouped people into CMG, US IMG, and IMG. Well, in Australia, you'd be an Australian medical graduate, so you'd be the top preference with everyone else. So yes, potentially, if you're interested in one of the hyper competitive specialties, completing your specialty training in Australia and then returning back home could be an option. I hope that answers that question. Can we get the recording of this session? Yes, the recording will be posted on our website. Does UQ still have an observership at the end of the first year? No, that's not a requirement for internationals. It is kind of an elective opportunity if you're interested, though. Does anyone else have questions for me in the chat? I'm happy to answer anything you may have. have you come across or heard of major differences in training from one med school and the next in Australia, or even in terms of matching for residencies? No. I don't necessarily think that. So specifically, I have not heard that there's a vast difference between the curriculums between schools. Again, as I mentioned, it's really upon yourself and your own initiative to apply to and look into the pathways. If you are interested in Canada or the US, kind of have to take that upon your own to make sure that you're fulfilling the requirements and you're going along on the respective timelines and whatnot. I wouldn't say that there's vast differences between programs and how they prepare you or the chance you have of getting a residency or whatnot. Really, you're either classified, as I mentioned, into that cohort of the IMG. After you're an IMG, you're then an Oceania Pacific Islander or Oceania Pacific Island region. I showed you the match stats for that specific region. I don't think there's much, you can't really discern between each of the schools. I don't know too much into that, to be honest with you, but I don't think there's a big difference. Any tips for first year specifically? If I had to say, and I mentioned some of these things, the biggest thing is focus on acclimating to a new country, to meeting people and meeting friends, whether it be other Canadians and internationals or the Australians that you're going to meet. I think that's the most important thing. Get comfortable with your environment, get settled into whatever accommodation, whatever city you're living in. I think that's the most important thing to do just off the bat. Don't worry about research and extracurriculars and all that kind of stuff. That there's so much time to do all of that. Don't worry about that. Just get acclimated to your environment and to a new country. I think the other thing that would be important is in your first couple of weeks of med school, it's going to be a new thing, just like when you started high school, when you started undergrad. The teaching style may be a little bit different. How to navigate through courses and whatnot is a new thing. That's completely okay. So I want to stress that it's completely normal to feel all those kinds of things in your first couple of weeks. I'd say find a good support group in terms of friends and who may have similar goals as you and whatnot. As I mentioned, specifically when it comes to, let's say, studying and how to retain the content and whatnot, everyone learns very differently. I'm sure many of you have heard about how med students use Anki and flashcards religiously. You will come to understand that there's tons of information, of course, thrown at you. And I think a reason why Anki and flashcards are so popular upon med students is just because that kind of rote memorization, spaced repetition style works, because there's lots of terms and being able to see them over and over is kind of, I don't know, in terms of evidence and how your brain may retain information, you can look into different study strategies. But in terms of when there's a lot of content and you need to recognize certain terms and things like that and images, whether it be anatomy, histology, or pathology, spaced repetition is popular. So try it out. It's not for everyone though as well. There's so many different ways you can learn and study. And I'm sure through your high school, undergrad, I've had experiences. All of you have your own study methods and ways, but I'd try things out. There's no one thing that fits every student or works for every student in terms of a strategy. Everyone's a little bit different, so try things out. I provided a lot of those resources that were helpful to a lot of students. See which ones work for you, which support you in your learning. And yeah, I hope that answers your question just in terms of some overall tips to keep in mind. What email contact? Okay, so I'll put that in here. info.caamsa@gmail.com. Does anyone, okay, some specific questions with housing and whatnot. If you want to private message me on Facebook after with some specific questions about UQ, let's say, you can do that, but I don't know if that's necessarily relevant for everyone else in terms of housing and whatnot. But do you guys have?
Hi, excuse me, I have a question.
Yes.
What is the procedure if someone wants to transfer from one med school to another, if they wish to do it? Is it possible, or is there any thing to follow for that?
Are you just to clarify, are you talking about within Australia or international?
Within Australia.
Okay. Transfer schools. So so this is something I'm not necessarily familiar with per se, but if I were to guess, I believe that just as we applied through Austrec, you would likely have to still apply again to that whatever school you want to transfer to in their intake. And if you were successful, after, of course, the interview and whatnot, then you'd have to look into specifically whether, let's say you completed 1 year at your original school and then applied to another school and got in and wanted to see if you could transfer your year 1 credits. That's probably going to be on a school-to-school basis, if I were to guess. I have never heard or don't know anyone personally who has done that, so I can't speak too much about it, but that might be a better question for Austrec. So I'm sorry if I can't answer that completely, but we can also look into that. If you want to email us with that inquiry, we can try looking into that a little bit more.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions from anyone? We'll do I'm good to do another 10 minutes if anyone has more stuff to ask.
I have one just last question. It's not about like schools, but for like research positions.
Yeah.
When you like participate to like a group, there's not much like paid positions, right? It's most likely volunteering stuff. And no, I see.
Yeah. Well, in terms of our international research collaboration, it's all extracurricular based, so volunteer based. When it comes to research positions, there are research job opportunities, available to individuals that that's not something we do with CAAMSA, of course, but I'm sure, through LinkedIn or other services, Indeed and whatnot, you'd be able to find some paid research positions. I'm not sure the time commitment many of those have, and being able to, be able to, handle that necessarily with your MD at the same time may be difficult, but
yeah.
Of course,
yes.
Everyone's situation is a little bit different. Yeah.
Okay, don't focus on EC. Okay.
You said you won't focus on ECs and research, so would you start looking into? Okay. So Frank, yes, I didn't necessarily want to say don't focus on ECs and research. I wanted to just make the point of, in your first, at least initial months, first semester, you're moving into a new country, you're starting med school. They're all very new endeavors that you're starting, of course, and you want to be able to make sure that you're navigating that and you're comfortable with all of that, of course, before you think about necessarily like getting involved to a large extent with research or extracurriculars and whatnot. Now, some people acclimate a little bit quicker when it comes to finding what process works for them on a week-to-week basis for the med school curriculum and all of that, and so maybe they might start looking into that a little earlier. But again, I just wanted to make the point that initially, don't worry too much about I'd say specific, like, and this is all my personal insights. Everyone can choose their own, but I'd say that make a priority to make sure that you're acclimating yourself to the new environment that you're going to be in, and making sure that your priority, of course, is your MD, and making sure that you're moving along with that, and able to sustain through that. And so I'd make that a focus in the beginning, is all I want to say. ECs and research, whether it be a couple months in, your second semester of first year, your end of your first year, those are all things that you'll always have opportunities to get involved with. And really when you find a time that you're able to handle that extra responsibility is when you can start thinking about it. And again, maybe research is not for everyone as well. And I want to say that, there's many stories and many personal, cases I know of people that, research wasn't for them, but, they had a large passion into something else, whether it be some other kind of extracurricular, and they got, they really got involved with that. And when it comes to residency applications and all of that, research is not a necessary component. Of course, it's a considerable component if that's something you're interested in, but if research isn't for you, I wouldn't force it. Because it's, of course, first and foremost important that whatever you're doing, you're excited about, you're passionate about, and you want to work towards it. So that's just some kind of personal stuff, I'd say. Any tips for getting placement in Canada during medical school international? Yeah, so in terms of international elective placements, again, a lot of schools probably, from what I heard, won't have them pre-set up for you, predetermined. In your third and fourth year, when you're doing rotations, a lot of that you're going to have to set up yourself, or through CAAMSA and stuff like that. We can try helping you, support you in finding those. Really, you're gonna, again, this is something to worry about more towards your third year of med school. But if you are interested, come that time, contacting the medicine faculties at certain universities in Canada and the US that you're interested in completing those electives at would be the first step in trying to obtain some of those. We've got another maybe 5 minutes here if anyone else has other questions. But if not, this recording will be posted and the slides will be posted as well. But if anyone has, I'll be around for another 5 minutes if anyone has more questions. If not, feel free to leave whenever you want to. Thank you, of course, for coming. As I mentioned, I'll go back a couple slides. I think this is a great opportunity with our AMBOSS giveaway, because 6 months AMBOSS subscription is valued, at a couple $100. So if you attended today, I have a list here. Go to our Instagram, which is CAAMSA_. If you follow us, like the post for our giveaway and tag 3 friends, you'll be entered to win, and we'll announce that at the end of the weekend. I will continue taking some questions here. Is there anything you did or wish you brought with you to Australia for study purposes? So, I mean, this is on a case-to-case basis. Some people like to pack extra luggages and whatnot and bring, stuff from home. Everyone's study, environment or setup is a little bit differently, set up differently. I'd say I personally, when it came to, I like having an extra monitor, for instance. I didn't bring a monitor, of course, from Canada. That would have been a little bit difficult, but I just purchased one down there. There's some things that I think would be easier to purchase down there, and some that you should bring. In terms of, was there anything you did or wish you brought? I mean, I wouldn't say in particular necessarily. I mean, some people like that Anki remote that I'm sure many of you probably have seen in different videos and whatnot, is helpful for flashcards. Of course, if you, a lot of people have iPads or touchscreen device because they like annotating or drawing certain slides, or whether it be anatomy or physiology. Sometimes, people like having that, physical pen to annotate and whatnot. So that's an option if that's your style of learning. But again, everyone's a little bit differently, works a little differently. I'd say just overall, one thing you might realize is there, and I mentioned this throughout the presentation, but you're going to come to understand that in med school, of course, there's a lot of information, and that's completely normal and okay. And your study processes might have to change a little bit from your undergrad, whether regurgitating notes and recopying down notes and stuff like that may become a little bit less useful in terms of your time and efficiency when it comes to material. And that's why a lot of people have kind of started to use newer methods like flashcards and Anki and whatnot, just in terms of more efficiency. But again, everyone works a little bit differently. So you'll find out what works for you as you begin that. Is there anything I can do now to strategize how I will study when I start, or something I'll need to figure out along the way to interact with lecture content and realize my needs? Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be too worried about this now. Really, you're going to have to, start, in orientation, there'll probably be many different presentations to help guide you in terms of what resources are available to you and whatnot. In your first week of med school, in your first couple weeks of med school, you're gonna come to realize quickly what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what study methods you prefer, what you don't. I don't think there's necessarily something you can necessarily do right now. I think you just need to focus on getting to Australia, getting comfortable with the environment. Within your first couple weeks of your MD, you're going to come to learn what things work for you, what things don't, and just allow that process to happen. It's a normal process for everyone. I wouldn't stress too much about thinking, oh, is there a way I can prep myself in terms of certain study methods or whatnot? I think that everyone, works and learns differently. What your school may offer you and the style of teaching at your school might be different at each respective school. So I can't really comment on, what may work at one school or another, but how many hours should be budgeted per week for studying? Approximate, of course. Yeah. I mean, again, this all depends on, how much background, let's say, you have in anatomy and some of these subjects, of course. Someone who may come from, anatomy background may have to spend a lot less time when it comes to their anatomy block or the anatomy side of things, for instance. So of course, it's hard to put a number on amount of studying. I'd say if you are efficient and work well with your time, if you treat it almost like a full-time job, 9 to 5, for instance, and you work well and find a system that works for you, then you should be successful within that. But again, not a kind of blanket approach. Everyone learns and works differently. Some people may need more time or less time on certain areas, and that's completely normal. Of course, during exam times might ramp up a little bit with the hours, but very hard to answer that question. But I'd say if you're, find a method that works for you. I'd say a 9 to 5 is generally more than enough to succeed. Okay, it's about 12 o'clock now. I think I answered most questions here for you guys. Thank you all for attending. Again, if you guys are interested in this AMBOSS giveaway, head over to CAAMSA_ on our Instagram right now and follow these instructions and you'll be entered. I'll announce the winner at the end of Sunday. Thank you guys for joining. Get excited. It's really an exciting endeavor that you all will be embarking on. As I mentioned, if you ever have questions, info.caamsa@gmail.com for CAAMSA. You can Facebook message me personal related questions. But yeah, hope this was beneficial and insightful for you guys, and we'll have more webinars throughout the semester to help you guys as well. So thanks all for coming, and have a great rest of your weekend.